Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to do one of my favorite videos to have, but not to make. And that is a video about all the books that I've read in 2022. So this will be a ranking video. I will start with the worst and go up to the best. And I will talk about my worst books and my best books a little bit in depth. This year I have 3 worst books and then 9 best books that I will discuss. All the books in between I will just let you know in the ranking kind of style, so which kind of rating I gave them. I hope that I can be a little bit quicker than I was last year, but usually I'm not. Who am I kidding? But yeah, if you're interested to see that, please keep watching. I also wanted to mention that I will do a separate reading stats video that will come your way next week. So just in case you're interested in more statsy kind of things. This today is gonna be a list of the books. Next week we're gonna talk about some more accumulated results about my reading. So let's get started with the worst of the worst. So this year I actually have a book that I gave 1.5 stars to. I should have given it 1 star, but sometimes I'm just not ready for it. But that book is Sand by Wolfgang Herrndorff. This was hands down the worst book I've read this year. This has so much sexism, misogyny, racism, and everything in between in here, and the plot is so stupid. Now this is supposed to be some kind of a satire, but yeah, maybe I'm just too dumb to see it. That is an option, but I don't really know what the author tried to do here, except for creating very horrible characters with the worst traits ever, making fun of them, and then letting most of them die in a horrific way or something like that. So I could not tell you what this book is about because as soon as I finished it, I deleted it from my memory, and I just have that very sour aftertaste of just hating this book. So this is definitely my worst book of the year, and I'm sorry if you got this and you think it's a masterpiece. I cannot agree with that. But yeah, that I will unhaul as soon as this video is done. And then I also had 3 2-star reads. I won't go into much detail here, but since those are the runner-ups for the worst book, I just want to say a couple of things. The first one was Cherish Farah by Bethany C. Morrow. This is my most disappointing book. This was a book about 2 girls, and it's supposed to be a social horror, but the only thing that really scared me was how bad it was, and I wanted to love it so much, but I thought that everything about it was not great at all. I did not like the writing. There was a lot of repetition, and I think the way that the audiobook narrator read this made it even worse. Like, I still have the word control stuck in my mind because of this book, and it might never go out of there ever again. And I also really did not like the twist. For one, it was so easy to see, and then it also didn't make any sense at all. Like, not at all. So yeah, did not like that. The next one is 12 Kings by Bradley Beaulieu. I don't know how to say the name. This is the first book in a series of desert fantasy following a main character called Cheda, and this is just a book that I could not take seriously. It was actually a book I had DNF'd last year, but then for a magical readathon challenge I decided to pick it back up and finish it. I didn't have too much left of it, and so I gave it another try, still hated it. There's one character in there, I think the character was called something like Mahmoud or something like that, I don't quite remember. He was kind of interesting, but all of the rest I just hated. And it was just a white man writing an Arab-inspired fantasy, and I did not like that at all. And the last book I did not like and give 2 stars was a book called Christmas in Magnolia Glen by Caitlin Meadows. This was the last holiday romance that I read, and this one just had all the wrong messaging. It was supposed to be a Christmas Carol retelling, but it wasn't really, and it was, as I said, a romance, but the kind of backstory of the couple was very, very traumatic. And the way the main character worked through all of that in 24 hours just because the guy was hot, it was just not something I wanted to read. And I only finished it because I was listening to it while I was driving, so I couldn't switch it out. So these were my worst books of the year. Now we're gonna start off with 3 stars actually, because I did not have any 2.5 star reads this year. So starting with these, I think they were actually fine, and if you want to pick them up, you can definitely do that, but they weren't my favorite. I will just mention them from now on until we get to the top book. So, with 3 stars, we have Sleighbells Ring by Ray Ann Thane, The Philosophy in the Bedroom by Marquis de Sade, Das Buch vom Tee by Kakuso Okakura. I think this is something like the Book of Tea. Bad Hair Day, so in the German editions, this is the 10th Goosebumps book by R.L. Stein. Small Cat Chi by Konami Kanata, this is volume 6. Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Caw. The Carrow Haunt by Darcy Coates. And From Bad to Cursed by Lana Harper, this is the 2nd book in this companion series. Next up, we have the books that I gave 3.5 star to, so again, books I would recommend if you're interested, but that weren't my favorite. The Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marillier. Luck of the Titanic by Stacey Lee. The Conductors by Nicole Glover, this is her first book in a series. Wild Woman and the Blues by Denny S. Bryce. Mathilde by Leonard Frank, a kind of German classic that never got to be a classic. The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen, this is the first book in a duology. Bitter Oranges by Claire Fuller. Miracle on Christmas Street by Annie O'Neill. And Winter Kisses at Roseford Cafe by Faye Keenan. Okay, so now we're on to the 4-star books, though these books I would definitely recommend if you're at all interested. We have The Last Smile of Thunder City by Luke Arnold. This is the first book in a series. The Gravity of Us by Philip Starmer. The Map of Salt and Stars by Zane Yukada. An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. Small Country by Gail Fay. Jade City and Jade War by Fonda Lee. This is book 1 and 2 in the Greenbone saga. Normal People by Sally Rooney. Listening to the Orchestra by Suzanne Hill. This is a short story collection. Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. This is the first book in a duology. The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. This is the first book in the Discworld series. The Hannah Wars by Adiba Jai-Gedar. Dead Man in a Ditch by Luke Arnold. This is the 2nd book in this series. In Deeper Waters by F.T. Lukens. The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharp. The Poppy War, The Dragon Republic and the Burning God by R.F. Kuang, the whole Poppy War trilogy. Behold the Dreamers by Mbolo Mbue. All Systems Red by Marcia Wells. This is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries. How Beautiful We Were by Mbolo Mbue. Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This is the first book in a duology. Rules for Vanishing by Kate Ellis Marshall. Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. Monstrous Volume 5 War Child. And Monstrous Volume 7 The Devourer by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. Volume 5 was a reread for me. Beloved by Toni Morrison. The Diviners by Libba Bray. This is the first book in the series. Cackle by Rachel Harrison. How to Excavate a Heart by Jake Maya Arlo. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This was a reread. And King of Crows by Libba Bray. This is the 4th book and finale to this series. And we are on to 4.5 star books. So these I would definitely very highly recommend. We have Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Farseer trilogy. Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. This is the 3rd book in the Greenbone saga. Ace by Angela Chen. Love Marriage by Monica Ali. Girl Serpent Thorn by Melissa Bashadust. My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton and Jodie Meadows. This is a reread and also a first book in a series. We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee. M to WTF by Samantha Allen. Medusa by Jessie Burton. Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey. If I would do a top 10, this would make the number 10 spot. City of Brass. An Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. This is book 1 and 3 in the Devabhat trilogy. Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. Monstrous Volume 6, The Wow by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. This is my favorite one in the series so far. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. Make You Mine This Christmas by Lizzie Huxley Jones. Lair of Dreams and Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. This is books 2 and 3 in this series. And here we are with the 5 stars. Now before I get into my top 9, I will have one reread that I want to mention, and that is The Wind Singer by William Nicholson. I've read this one to my partner. The first one is more children's literature, the other two are more YA, but I do really love this, and so yeah, I reread the first one. Okay, so starting off with number 9, we have There by Tommy Orange. This is a book about a Native American community, and this doesn't follow one character, but quite a few characters that, you know, their paths cross, they have some things in common and stuff like that. So while you read the book, you're not quite sure how it's all connected, and then at the end it all comes together in quite an interesting and heartbreaking way. I really enjoyed this book. This was my first 5-star read of the year, and it's definitely a book I want to reread just because it is so short that I feel like you can forget a lot of it very quickly. So yeah, this is one of the books that I definitely want to reread at some point. On number 8, we have The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the second book in the Devabhat trilogy, and I enjoyed the whole trilogy, but this book was my favorite because I felt like the whole second half was just such a blur. There was so much action, so much going on, so much at stake that I could not put this book down, while the other two books were kind of like that as well. I felt like this one had the best balance of like things going on and character development, and it was just great. In this series we're following a girl called Nari, and she is basically a con woman and she has a magical healing power, and in the first book she gets whisked away to a magical city called Devabhat, and then we kind of follow her figuring out where she came from and how her connection works with this magical world and everything like that. So yeah, this book definitely my favorite of this series, and it was just so much fun, so much action, and just one twist after the other at the end. Then on number 7 we have quite a different book. This is a non-fiction and it is called Heimat, a German family album by Nora Krug. This is about a woman, she is an illustrator, and she went to study in the US and stayed there afterwards, but she's originally from Germany, and in this book she kind of goes through her family history, the way her family is connected to the Second World War, and by doing that this book talks a lot about how we don't really know a lot about our families in Germany, because there is this like huge not only gap, but like just a cut, and you don't really talk about anything that happened before that. And I thought this was such an interesting way to look at our families that it just moved something inside of me, and there was a lot in here that maybe I had as a feeling but not as a full-grown thought. So I really enjoyed it, and apart from that, just the way this is done is stunning. Stunning art and the incorporation of like real documents and stuff like that, just amazing. Also a book I definitely want to reread. It's so great, and I think especially if you're German you will get a lot out of this, but maybe even if you're not German this might help you to understand Germans around you. I don't know, I would just highly recommend it. Then for the lighter, fluffier mood, on the 6th spot, we have Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I, as anyone else, fell in love with this book. It is absolutely amazing, just cozy feels. I love the main character. In this one we follow Viv, who is an orc, and she decides to put all the like warrior past behind her and open a coffee shop, and we just follow her on this journey. And a lot of people say that there's basically no plot and no stakes in this book, so I was quite surprised that there is much more at stake than you would think, but it still has this like feeling of a hug, so I really appreciated this book. It came to me at a time where I needed it, and it's also one that I will probably give another listen to. The audiobook is also narrated by the author, so that's always extra fun. Then it gets darker. We're coming to my kind of slavery reads. So on the 5th spot we have Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. And this book is quite heartbreaking. It is a modern classic, and we follow a young woman, a young black woman, who one day gets sucked back into the past, and she has to save a white boy. And whenever he is in danger, she travels through time to save him. And it's all about their connection and whether she should save him or not. And it's just such an interesting look at slavery times, because you have that modern perspective of the main character, who is, as I said, a young black woman from the 70s. So we have this like, yeah, this like rationale of the modern world, but then she is put into this scenario of slavery times. So I thought that was such a clever way to explore this topic, and it was done so well. I really loved this book. I loved the main character. I loved her relationship with his partner. The way that was portrayed in this book was also really interesting, because the partner is white, and at some point he also travels with her into the past. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this book, even though the topic is heartbreaking. There's a lot of very cruel stuff happening in here, so definitely look up trigger warnings if you want to read it. But I thought it was a masterpiece, just the modern classic that it is. So I have no idea whether I just messed up the numbers, but we're on the 4th spot, and this book is also about slavery times. It is Conjure Woman by Afia Atakora. Now this one doesn't have any time travel in it, but it has a magical realism feel to it, and this book just ticked all of my boxes. I absolutely loved it, and it was one of those books that I had gotten from the library multiple times before I've actually read it, but I always knew there was something, so I kept getting it again and again. And I'm so glad I did not give up on this book, because it was amazing. In this one we follow a young woman whose mother was kind of the healer on a plantation. So she had a slightly privileged position, but we are now in the time after slavery was abolished. Though this book also explores the question of what is freedom, what happened to these people after basically the plantation fell apart, and kind of what price does our main character pay for her community and stuff like that. It has a trope where a man comes into this space and he is Christian, and I do like that kind of conflict of Christian men and then women who are closer to like nature magic or paganism and stuff like that. So this is something that is explored here as well. And I just overall like this book so much. The way it was just structured, the twists, and as I said, just that feeling as well, and this exploration of the community. It was very interesting, and I feel like this book is not talked about enough, so maybe you should check it out. So now we're in the top 3, and number 3 is a book I'm currently rereading, and that is Pat by Akweke Emezi. This book is just so great, and I'm pretty sure you've heard all the praises before. In this one, we are following a girl called Jem, and one day a painting of her mother's comes to life and tells her that it is pet, and it is there to hunt monsters. But Jem lives in an utopia where there are no more monsters, so she's trying to figure out what to do with Pat and whether to believe it. And this book is just so great. The kind of utopia you have here is the world that would happen if most of what the Black Lives Matter movement wants actually becomes true. So, for example, there's no more prisons and the old structures are broken up to get rid of all the discrimination that is structural. And yeah, it's just great. So also the definition of the monsters here, once you start reading the book, you realize it is all the people who have been privileged, who have taken advantage of other people and just hurt other people. So that's their definition of a monster. And it's just so interesting. It's also heartbreaking. It is quite a heavy theme that it deals with, but I don't want to say it because it is kind of a spoiler, and I would recommend looking up the content warnings if you want. But this book is just phenomenal. It is YA, but I think that anyone and everyone can learn something from this, and I love it. So I'm currently rereading it as well because, yeah, it's been a year and I wanted to experience it again. Number 2 is also no surprise. It is Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. This is an excellent book. This is one of those books where I realize how much I love a historical fiction and how much I love family sagas. Similar to the Greenbone saga, which there are some similarities between the two, but Greenbone saga is fantasy, this one is not. In this book we follow a Korean family and mainly a woman called Sunja, and she has to move to Japan because of circumstances, and we basically experience her life. We also get some information on her parents, and we later on focus more on her children, but she's kind of the glue that keeps this story together. This book deals a lot with kind of racism as well, but different from a like westernized idea of racism, because in this one it focuses on Koreans and Japanese people and how the Japanese treat Koreans as less than human. And so this is also a very heartbreaking book. There is a lot of horrible things happening to our main character and her family. We follow her during the Second World War, where Japan was a one of the like bad forces in the world. And so yeah, just a lot happens in here, as you can imagine, from the kind of time frame and the conflicts, and yeah, it was great. It was just amazing. And it's one of those books where I also really want to reread it one day because there's just so much in it. This would be an amazing book club book as well, just to discuss it with other people. And my number 1 is kind of cheating because it is 3 books. But I have tried and I cannot decide which one is my favorite. So they're all number 1 and you have to live with it. And that is the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. I love this so much. I already want to reread them and it's not even been a year since I finished them. So this is a trilogy. In this trilogy we follow a world that has come to its end. There is a 5th season, which is basically when a lot of horrible things happen, a lot of people die, there's earthquakes and anything and everything. And so this might be the end of the world. And in the first book we are following 3 characters, and it kind of switched it up a little bit with the other books. Like we always follow kind of different characters, but there is one clear line that keeps it all together. So I don't want to spoil anything here, but in this book we also explore racism because we have a race of people in here. I think they're called Origins or something like that, and they can influence the earth. So they can cause earthquakes, but they can also stop them. They can make volcanoes explode or stop that. They can basically move the earth. And these people are oppressed a lot by the other, like people who can't do that, because they think that these origins are just too dangerous, and if they had free reign over their powers, they would destroy everything. And so in the first book especially, we explore this from a very different angles with the 3 characters that we have. And then after that, it also gets a little bit more plot focused, and we learn a lot about the backstory of the whole world, especially in the 3rd book, which I also really enjoyed. This series does have a second person narration, which I adore. And I know that that sometimes keeps people from reading it, but I would say do not let that keep you from reading it, because this series is just so amazing. In the first book, we also have a poly relationship for a very short amount of time that I absolutely loved as well. So overall, these are just like, I think my second favorite fantasy series of all time after Lord of the Rings. And that is very high praise, because I do actually read quite a lot of fantasy, even though I don't always show that. So yeah, that was my reading. That was all the books that I've read, from the worst to the best. Definitely let me know what your best and worst books were in 2022. I would love to hear about that. And I will talk to you very soon. Bye!